Hello everyone. I'm going to introduce you to a major piece in our proprietary assessment and treatment approach here at the Game Changer, and that is QEEG brain mapping. Now you may be thinking, what? That's quite the alphabetic soup of acronyms. But what you need to know is that QEEG, like a map of the world, reveals a map of the functioning of your entire brain. So every brain region, every brain network, which then enables us to tailor a much more accurate, more precise, more effective approach. So if you have a kid or you yourself suffer from focus issues or ADD, we can see how your prefrontal and executive function networks are firing. And if we see that, let's say, your prefrontal cortex is deficient, its energetic output is low, well then we know, yeah, we need to increase your brain's energetic output and do supplements, do foods, and tailor specific protocols to begin normalizing and optimizing those brain regions. Now, for people who have sustained concussions and identifying which regions of the brain where there may be an inflammatory exotoxic type response, if you have sleep issues or stress issues, we'll be able to identify how those regions in the back of your brain, also known as more of a reptilian brain, how they're functioning. And if we're able to see, are they over or underactive? How are the regions of the brain communicating? So how is your left frontal regions communicating with your right frontal regions? How is your left frontal cortex associated with executive function, communicating with your temporal lobes, which is more memory, so conversion from short to long-term memory? And if you're experiencing memory problems or focus problems, we'll be able to see, well, yeah, there's a reason why. It's because your prefrontal cortex and your memory centers may be overactive or underactive. And it's just this more sophisticated, more in-depth, clear picture that we can learn about a person's brain that allows us to be more precise in what we recommend for you. And one of the major pieces, once we have this picture, a map of your brain, is we can use and devise specific protocols using a technology called the Neurofield, using pulsed EMF coils to begin normalizing and optimizing brain regions. And because this is so sophisticated type technology, it does require significant expertise, significant understanding of the brain, of neurology, of brain chemistry, how the various brain regions work. And it also requires a really intimate understanding of a person's sensitivities, what's going on with their body, emotions, so that we know we can find the right approach to work for them. Sometimes it's the neurofield, sometimes it's simple brain-based neurofeedback, sometimes it's just implementing certain foods, sometimes it's certain supplements. But in any case, this brain mapping provides the precise evidence and understanding of what's going on in a person's brain, so we know what's the most effective things to do for you. So if you have ADD, focus issues, Alzheimer's, dementia, concussion, anxiety, sleep problems, or any type of mental problems, or if you're on the other end and want to optimize your performance, optimize your learning, optimize your memory, optimize your energy, this is a major tool to understand how to most effectively do so. All right, so what we're doing here is we just put on an EEG cap, or a superhuman cap if you may. What this will do is, with the 22 sensors here, it'll be able to measure the functioning of each region of the brain, and actually by a process what's called triangulation, it's a big sounding word, enables us to find the functioning of deeper structures. And I'm here with Connor Chalk today. Connor is a high school student. And Connor, what are you looking to get out of our session here today?
Really looking to improve my focus, be able to study harder in school and set myself up for success in university next year.
So Connor goes to a sports school, big into sports. What's your main sport, buddy?
Hockey and lacrosse.
Hockey and lacrosse, so I'm sure playing hockey he's had his bell rung a few times. And by doing this QEEG, we'll be able to see, okay, is there any signs of past damage, and then we'll know what we can do about it. And what I'm doing here is I'm just putting a little bit of conductive paste just to increase the connectivity of the signal. This, unfortunately, is the only time a person has to experience a bad hair day. And one of the biggest things I like to ask people is we really want to have a defined criteria. It's like, how will you know if what we're doing together is effective? So I think for you, Connor, it would probably be like how's your performance in hockey, how's your studies and stuff. Would you agree, kind of?
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things for, when I was in high school and a lot of high school kids we work with is just there's so many damn things on their plate. You have academics, you have school, you have parents bugging you about setting yourself up in a career. You got relationships and girls you like, and there's a lot of things. And then there's those dark influences that every kid's exposed to. And one of the most important things is just having the confidence and capacity to be able to deal and manage with all. Or oftentimes we find like we just make bad decisions. And most importantly in bad decisions would be things, let's say kids may be drawn to drugs. And there's a reason why. It's because if kids are super stressed, they're going to resort to things that make them feel better. And let's say an example of that would be dope. And where do you think the name dope come from? Because you get doped up, it increases what's called dopamine in the brain. And actually, dopamine is produced in one of these brain areas. And if we use, let's say, nutraceuticals and supplements, as well as some of the Neurofield, we can increase Connor's dopamine in his brain. And what that mean for him will be increased learning, increased motivation, basically a better ability to perform with all these things on his plate. I'm sure it'll make his mom happier too.
We can only hope.
And that's the biggest piece for kids is you just got to add in the good so that they can feel good, perform good, and then it just kind of takes away any need to resort to harmful things like drugs or any, harmful illicit type behaviors. And yeah, really it's all this work setting someone up for just 3 minutes recording eyes open, 3 minutes recording eyes closed. And from that QEEG brain mapping, we can pick and choose and find a picture of a person's brain. So it's kind of only one bad hair day for lots of fun later on. Most people find the information they learn is just so shockingly accurate, so shockingly informative that, a little bit of goop isn't that much trouble. And then what we do next is we go grab a reader machine that can just confirm that the connection over every brain region is accurate. So the last thing we want to do is just be measuring spaced error and, then working off a completely inaccurate match. So that's why we're just really precise in setting things up so that the brain mapping is accurate. Last piece we got to get here, just the ear clips so that the electrically grounded. How you doing there, Connor?
Perfect.
Yeah. That feel all right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what level hockey you playing there, Connor?
Double A.
Double A?
Yeah.
You're a goalie, right?
No.
No?
Forward.
Forward. Cool. A lot of kids on your team suffer brain injuries and concussions.
Yeah.
A lot of times you don't even know, eh? You just get nailed and it's like, who knows, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever sustained any concussions?
In my opinion, yes, but I've never had to go actually see a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure over the last 10 years I've had a couple.
And that's kind of the thing. The assessment for concussion is simply whether you can perform certain tests. And that can all depend on how you're feeling on a certain day, whereas something like a full brain mapping is, okay, we're able to see what's going on in the brain, and good day or not, we're able to know and see if there is likely indications of concussion. And that's where one of the biggest things is with something like this brain mapping is there has been shown to be extremely high correlation between the functioning of specific brain regions and actual mental abilities. And obviously the correlation isn't perfect. This this can help to just inform so that we know, okay, this is likely how a person's mentality, emotions are likely going to be affected by the functioning of certain brain regions. And one of the good analogies I use is like this is kind of going to the mechanic to rewire and fine-tune your brain. And then once your brain's running really well, you can choose, how fast you want to drive it, where you want to drive it, and what you want to achieve in your life. So for someone like Connor as a student, he's like, yeah, he's going to want to use his brain power to focus better in school, learn better, perform better in hockey. Yeah, so what we're seeing here is really, really good connections between all these brain regions. So we know we're almost good to go here. And just going through the various brain networks here and brain regions. If you're not aware, we'll do a little brain function 101. And so the regions in the back of the brain here that we're just ensuring the connection's good are called your occipital lobes. Occipital lobes are really big for sleep, really part of our, called like a reptilian fight or flight type brain. These are one of the first evolved portions of our brain which are constantly hypervigilant, hyperactive to ensure we don't get eaten by a tiger on, let's say, the plains. And unfortunately, when these visual regions, which actually control up to 90% of our entire brain, are overactive, as we start to see anxiety problems, sleep problems. And one of the biggest things in using neurotherapies and why things like meditation are so successful is because in doing meditation with eyes closed, complete focus, we're able to calm down and slow down those occipital regions so we can nourish and increase the functioning of other regions of our brain. One of which would be our prefrontal cortex. So prefrontal cortex, huge for decision making, focus, execution, basically your source of your willpower, and a lot of neurochemicals are produced in these regions of our brain. And these are more of our latest evolved areas of the brain. So after we were sure that we weren't going to get eaten by a tiger, those were developed first. Then we started developing more neocortex type regions of the brain to help us deal with social complexity, help us deal with more options, help us deal with relationships. So those are the frontal lobes there. And then next we have, these are the temporal lobes here. Huge for emotions, memory. And really in these regions here underneath is called your hippocampus. And the hippocampus is huge from conversion from short-term to long-term memory. And a lot of times when we're seeing extreme stress is that these regions get going so fast, and they're going so fast that memories can't consolidate. And also in these regions are called your limbic networks. Your limbic networks are your emotional networks. And when these are overactive, we see things like PTSD, we see things like anxiety, stress. And a lot of times these can be overactive from traumatic emotional experiences, traumatic relationships, or let's say you consume a toxic drug that messes with the serotonin pathway, which may cause damage in these regions. Now, serotonin, if you don't know, it's the feel-good, well-being neurochemical in the brain. Huge for neuroplasticity and memory. And last, we have our motor regions and parietal regions, which are huge for spatial learning, spatial orientation, and motor activities. So for these regions of the brain here, the parietal regions, we see they're overactive. People have a lot of inner chatter. We'll see them being slightly off if there's some physical injury, pain, nerve issues, and really big in motor and sensitivity. Okay. Alrighty. So we have good connection in all the sites here. We're ready to start with the brain recording session. Alright, so with the QEEG cap on Connor's head, what we're seeing here is the energetic output of each region in Connor's brain. So this is corresponding to each region here. It's measuring the activity of each specific region of the brain. And what we're seeing here is that certain brain regions are functioning higher than others. And we see that whenever Connor blinks or clenches his teeth, there's this artifact in data here. And what we're seeing here on this EEG readout of the function of each specific region in Connor's brain is that different regions are functioning with different amounts of amplitude, which would be like the power, the energy. Different regions are functioning at different frequencies, so they're dominant in different frequencies. And just from viewing this EEG alone, we can see, for instance, that regions in Connor's frontal lobes and parietal lobes are really overactive. So, I mean, that might just be an indication of a high amount of inner chatter, maybe a little bit of anxiety. Basically, what the full brain recording is, we're going to have Connor just stare straight ahead. Let's say, just choose a spot on the wall, that little outlet there. You see the outlet there on the wall there, Connor?
Yep.
So what we're going to do is we're just going to have you stare there at the outlet for 3 minutes. Try to blink and clench your jaw as minimally as possible. And of course, once we say this, people start blinking like crazy. So, just try to be relaxed, do what's natural. And so that way we can get a really clear recording, an accurate recording of what's going on in your brain. So what we're going to do, we're going to start the recording now. So if Connor, just keep your focus, eyes open, right on that one spot. We'll do 3 minutes of recording, starting now. Okay, and that's 3 minutes there. And what we're seeing is certain regions of Connor's brain are running way faster than others, such as regions of his frontal lobes right here. And that could show up potentially as some anxiety, or maybe, Connor may have had his bell rung at that region of his brain there. We'll be able to see this clearly when we dissect and grab the good data and see a picture of the brain mapping. And now we're going to move on to 3 minutes of recording, eyes closed. We're going to see what Connor's brain enters into with eyes closed. And now, Connor, are you a meditator?
No.
So Connor doesn't meditate, but a lot of people who meditate is that we'll close their eyes and they'll drop down into a meditation. And what we'll see is a brain meditating rather than a brain just at rest with eyes closed. And we want to see what the brain's doing just when it's running its own tune, running its own thing. Okay.
Should I try to not think of anything, or should I just close my eyes and be still?
Yeah, just close your eyes, let your mind be at rest. Whatever pops up, just let it come up and go. So that's kind of where, just see if a lot of clouds, a lot of thoughts come by, just see them as clouds and let them wash by, okay?
Okay. Now, if I came in one day and you were completely sober and you did it, and then you came in and you did a drunk on someone the next day, would you be able to see that from their brain scans?
Yeah, we'd see a lot of frontal slowing. You'd see your brain would just look tired, depressed. It would. That's where if you knock yourself out the night before, wouldn't recommend doing it immediately after. Now, Connor, do you have a hard time shutting your mind off when you close your eyes? There was your mind kind of racing.
Yeah.
So what we were seeing there was Connor's brain was actually extremely more active with his eyes closed than his eyes open. So that means you probably have a hard time shutting up that little inner chatter, and that may show up in let's say, some sleep problems. Whenever you're trying to make decisions, you have really overactive brain activity. Trying to go to sleep at night may be fairly difficult. What we see for most people is that after 20-30 seconds that their brain's able to calm down and get into a really nice relaxed type alpha state. And what we were seeing with Connor's brain is that Connor's brain remains in this really high beta even with eyes closed. And high beta is great when we want to be intensely focused on a task, but when we're just eyes closed at rest here, you want, your brain to be able to drop down into a deeper, relaxed type alpha. So that's one of the biggest keys, is that being able to drop down and shift gears from higher states to lower states is really key for performing at a high level, and also being able to drop it down to sleep and manage stress and anxiety. Let me just save this as eyes closed.
So that'd be like why when I go to like close my eyes and to sleep, it takes me a while to actually like.
It does, eh?
Yeah, to like actually fall asleep.
Yeah. Is when Connor's eyes were closed, his brain was still extremely overactive, which he was talking about corresponds to a poor ability to shut things off, to quiet things when it comes to sleep at night. Now, does that show up for you of any type, like let's say inner chatter when writing exams, playing hockey, or?
When I study or like when I read books, like I just find that my attention gets like strayed to other things, and just like I think about random stuff.
Yeah.
And it's never able to like just focus specifically on one thing and be able to like shut down when I'm trying to go to sleep right away.
Mm-hmm. And what we were seeing was actually the regions in Connor's parietal regions were extremely overactive, and certain areas of his frontal lobes were functioning much more quickly than others, which makes sense because then there would be, there's a drive towards multitasking if your frontal regions aren't all functioning at a high level, to be able to block out type distractions. So what we'll do here is we're going to grab some of the data here and get a picture of the brain map. So we want to minimize any types where there might have been a blink. Just grabbing all the data that's actual brainwave activity rather than a blink or a movement. Cool? Mm-hmm. And yeah, so it was looking like your brain was pretty stuck. You see the whole time your brain doesn't drop down, eh? Most people's brains, they usually drop down, quiet down with eyes closed, and what we were seeing, your brain actually starts running a little bit faster the more your eyes were closed. So that's where you're probably just driving yourself crazy in bed trying to go to sleep at nights, eh? Because this isn't the actual mapping itself. This is just like the energy, EEG output of your brain. Okay. Now we're going to generate a report. So this is just generating the report here. And we're using all this good data we selected to now get a map of Connor's brain. And go down here. What we're seeing is Connor's brain is producing extremely high amounts of high beta and beta while eyes closed. So what you're seeing is your brain, this is compared to a normative database. Your brain is extremely overactive and producing extremely high amounts of these frequencies in these higher frequency ranges. And what we're seeing here in this alpha range is that your brain is producing a little bit less than alpha, but still high amounts in theta and delta. But with eyes closed, you'd ideally want to see this in more of a green, which would be the norm. In blue would be underactive. And what we're seeing is pretty well for Connor, your brain's got a lot of energy. So your brain, you got a high energetic brain. So for you, any attention focus issues, it's less from AD, like ADD. So an attention deficit, it would more be hyperactivity, which would show up for him as he was talking about with the multitasking problems, etc. And then we move down to this next graph, is we see this is relative power. So this is compared to your own brain. Okay. So what we're seeing is your brain, you see this is called high beta, this is beta. These are the high frequencies, that's when we're extremely focused, processing information. With eyes closed, we shouldn't see high activity in beta, high beta. And what we're seeing is in these specific regions of the brain here, in this frontal region, is that there's really extreme high beta. And that could be a symptom of a past concussion, a past blow to the head, right here on the brain, because these regions are firing really, really fast. And then in terms of the inner chatter, ability to quiet down, is in these lower frequencies, your brain's really underactive. So your brain in these regions has a really hard time slowing it down, turning it off. Which is why for Connor you experience that continual inner chatter and ability to shut down and go to sleep. It's because your brain is producing little amounts, is deficient in these lower frequencies, but much overactive. Then, moving down here, we're going to go to this section here. This is called coherence. And coherence is kind of how well the regions of the brain are communicating. So when we see red lines, that indicates hypercoherence. And hypercoherence, imagine it's like you're on the phone with your friend and you guys just can't hang up. Or you're on the phone with a girlfriend, you just want to get her off the phone, but you can't hang up the phone because things are hypercoherent, they're stuck in. The opposite of that would be hypocoherence. So if we saw some blue lines, that would be like regions of your brain in conversation, and then mid-conversation you just drop the phone, drop the line. So what we're seeing is in these higher frequencies, your brain just gets locked in. So once your inner chatter gets going, everything starts activating.
Is it a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, we're saying if things, you can't drop the line, right?
Yeah.
Eventually you're going to want the phone to drop so you can just ease down. And what we're seeing is that the faster your brain runs, the more hyper-coherent the brain gets. And we see a lot of hyper-coherence in things like anxiety with people who are just have multitasking problems just because they're going from one thing to the next thing to the next thing to the next thing. And the whole brain just gets activated. So what we want to do with something like the Neurofield in terms of treatments is we'd want to try to break up some of this hypercoherence and get regions of the brain from being so locked in. And we see hypercoherence after there's been a concussion, because after a concussion, when there's a brain injury, everything just gets locked in almost to protect itself. Or we see hypercoherence if people have emotional issues, have a hard time letting things go. Now, you find you have a hard time letting things go?
Yeah.
So let's say in a relationship with a girlfriend, or a guy in school pisses you off, or your mom pisses you off, or your parents bother you. Do you have a hard time just kind of like letting go of that?
Yeah.
So that's because these regions here, they're super locked in. So once you get going on something, your whole brain starts lighting up. And it's not as bad when we drop down to these lower frequencies. So once you actually do, let's say, get to sleep or calm, relax, it's not as bad. And then moving down here, what we're seeing is this is called phase lag. So that's how fast the regions of the brain are communicating to each other. So if these regions were red, that means they're communicating slowly, poorly.
Okay.
What we're seeing in your brain, when your brain's running really fast, things go super fast. So not only are you locked in, you can't hang up the phone, you're like talking at 10 words per minute.
Okay.
Or not 10 words per minute, like 1,000 words per minute. So basically for you, we're seeing some, let's say, exotoxicity, either inflammation, whatever that may be caused by. It could just be a natural peculiarity of your brain. Things are running super fast in this beta, high beta. You got a high energetic brain overall. We want to do things to break up some of this hypercoherence so you have more flexibility. Because the whole key, in life and for you, is you want to have flexibility to ramp it up when you want to ramp it down, to calm down when you want to calm down. And you don't want the entire brain lighting up when one issue comes about. So that sound pretty accurate, Connor?
Yeah, it did. Very accurate.
So what we're doing here, Connor, is we're taking a look at the first view that you get is all the raw data and what the different specific sites are doing. What this can do is it can take a look at there's things like networks, where it's essentially how these different sites interact form higher functions, right? So executive function isn't just one area of the brain; it's about 7 or 8 different areas of the brain. So how are those 7 or 8 intercommunicating and working together to create executive function for you?
Aren't you only able to access like a certain amount of your brain? Like, don't most people?
That's a good kind
right.
of metaphor. You can tap into. I mean, that's just the distinction between your conscious mind and what's called your subconscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
But by doing things to gain more control of your brain, you can begin tapping into like deeper subconscious type functions in the brain nervous system. That's what they is. I mean, it's more popularized than.
I mean, the piece where they go, we only use 10% of our brain is a real, it's an oversimplification. And having said that, it's pretty amazing once you get things optimized how much more you have at your disposal.
It's more rather than functioning, Connor. It's more accessing. Because you're not only 10% of your brain's functioning, your whole brain's functioning. It's just like how much of your intelligence
Are you actually
accessing? Yeah.
Okay, Connor, so if you want to take a look at this. So a few things we pay attention to here. If we take a look at the networks, what these numbers mean is it's the number of nodes that aren't working quite right. Okay, these different networks form different functions. So for instance, the salience network is the network that allows us to pay attention to particular things. It's our brain saying this is important, this is not important. If your salience network is showing up, what often shows up is, okay, I'm here, but something goes off over there. It's like your attention gets taken away fairly easily. Okay, so it's a little bit of it's one of the factors of ADD that we'll see showing up for some people. Working memory is the ability to hold multiple things in your head at once, like remembering phone numbers, that kind of thing. So it's the short term, I guess on a computer it would be like the RAM, right? What are the files that are pulled up, keeping multiple files running at the same time. Okay. Pleasure network is literally that, it's the ability to feel good. So when this is showing up, it's not, there's a different network that shows up if a person's depressed. When the pleasure network shows up, people are often having the experience, it's like, things just kind of feel flat. They're a little muh, right? Not exciting, not completely crappy, but just nothing's particularly exciting these days. Right? Isocortex hippocampocentric is the ability to convert short-term memory into long-term memories. So when we've got a combination of working memory and isocortex, I look at that and go, school's going to be a challenge because school's about grabbing the information, sticking it in there. First of all, knowing which information to pay attention to, right? And then sticking it in there and getting it to stick. And
that's my biggest problem. Like, I learn things really easily, but like actually having it so 3 weeks later when I write the test, remembering it. Yeah, and that would totally fit with this stuff that we're seeing here. The schizophrenia network, don't worry, it doesn't mean you're schizophrenic. Okay, what it does do is when it shows up, the way a lot of people experience this, I call it the rich inner life. That they're like, I can go inside and I got all these cool thoughts and I'm floating around. The one issue though is sometimes we forget to come out of our inner life and interact with the rest of life, right? So again, compared to the nodes of showing at 11 and 10, not a big thing, but worth paying attention to. The local limbic is our emotional center. So where I see local limbic and pleasure networks showing up, I'd be saying, my guess is life isn't as colorful and cool as you might like it to be right now. Mm-hmm.
Does that
boring,
fit? Yeah, it's just kind of, okay. So what we know, that the good news in a sense is I look at this and you got high voltage networks going on, okay? So we're not dealing with an issue of your brain's not generating enough juice. Really what we're dealing with here is that the different areas aren't talking back and forth the way we want them to, right? And so we get these top 3 queued up for you. You're going to notice a lot of good stuff going on for yourself.
What's the pain network?
The pain network shows up if people are experiencing either chronic pain or chronic, what I would call physical discomfort. So it's sometimes full-blown like headache or pain, or other times just like, I just feel tense in my skin, right? Are you dealing with any sort of pain?
Yeah, all the time. I'm always like hurt from hockey and stuff. I'm working out, so.
Yeah. So that's some of what we're seeing here. Have you ever had any concussions or anything like that, or?
Like I was telling Kristen, that nothing like that I've gone to the hospital. They're like, oh, you've had a concussion, but.
You've been wrong a couple times.
Yeah, where I've like had to miss games and stuff like that.
Yeah. So that's probably what this is. If a person's had a bad concussion, like where they're lose consciousness and they're going to the emerge to make sure there's no bleeds and stuff like that, usually we'll see an under voltage situation, right? The brain goes into self-preservation mode and shuts down a lot of its oxidative mechanisms. For you, we're not seeing that. We're actually seeing, if anything, maybe a little bit of inflammation, right? But what it will do is it'll disconnect the networks. It'll make it harder for the different areas of the brain to talk back and forth. Kind of the cross wiring gets, somebody grabs the LAN cables and gives them a good snap, right? So that, and if you're dealing with, again, just sort of that mood flatness, that's also sometimes comes about by getting knocked around. Right? If you take a look at the symptom checklist, you can see there's attention stuff showing up, a little bit of mood, concussion. So
it looks like I have had a concussion.
You've been bonked, yeah. And again, not hard enough to short circuit your system completely, but hard enough to knock some wires loose. And that's essentially what this is saying to me, is we're not dealing with low voltage, we're dealing with some wires that got knocked loose. So part of our role here is to help you reattach them.
Reconnect those wires.
Yeah.
It's cool how much you can like understand just from looking at someone.
Yeah, it's pretty accurate, eh?
And to like say this stuff like.
Oh, dude. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's eyes closed.
Okay. Yeah. So there's still a little bit of inflammation in your system going on. And that's probably where some of the concussion left, right? You might have gotten, like when I look at that, I was sort of thinking, what would be the mechanism on that? And it's probably a hit here, brain gets contused there, bounces on the top of the head, bounces off the top of your skull there. And the coherence, one of the things to pay attention to in the coherence, when you get real hypercoherence going on here, sometimes it's a sign of some inflammation, so we're going to want to pay attention to that. The other piece though is you see how there's not too much hypercoherence here. So long as you relax and chill, you're probably easy to get along with. But if you get worked up, and you go in here, you snap, and it's like, you know what? May as well just leave Connor alone until he comes down a few notches, because when a person's that hypercoherent, you can't reason with them, because it's just this way. Does that make sense?
Exactly what my mother would say.
Yeah. So literally the best thing you can do if you're getting into that zone is sequester yourself for now until we get this fixed up. But like, go to your room, breathe deep, chill out.
Go walks, drive around.
Yeah. And once you get back into alpha, you're going to be very reasonable. You can hang out with and figure out, wow, what was that all about? But in this zone, don't bother. Just pull back and get some space. And what you'll find after you do some work with the work we do is that's going to look more like that, and you're going to find yourself you can coast easier, you can be flexible again, all that kind of good stuff. Yeah. Cool.
That's really cool.
As we saw with the brain mapping here today, the QEEG brain mapping is really, really accurate and shockingly so. Would you say so, Connor? A lot of the stuff.
Yeah, it was crazy to see how accurate it was. The stuff that I noticed about myself and that it directly applied to the screen.
So that's where just having this major piece as part of a whole assessment approach, just to learn more about what a person's dealing, what they're confronting with, and how their brain and body are working, is that way we can begin to tailor a more sophisticated approach with using things like the Neurofield, which uses pulsed EMF coils to change and entrain specific brain regions. We can also, from the brain mapping, understand which types of nutraceuticals, supplements, nutrition, as well as type mind strategies and lifestyle strategies for Connor. And for Connor, what we learned right here is we want to help break up some of that hypercoherence in his brain and find ways to really bring himself down, calm and relax. And that's where just teaching him simple, like let's say breathing techniques, or have Connor, let's say, work out when he's super stressed or super annoyed. We just know exactly what type of things will work better for him based on how his brain works. So this is a major piece of our whole assessment treatment approach, and really spearheads the whole development of a specific protocol to help optimize a person in the brain, in the body, mentally, physically. And to learn more about these neurotechnologies, alternative medical therapies, superfoods, super nutrition, super herbs, you can visit thegamechanger.expert and find out all about all the science, the research, the benefits, and the people who are beginning to play all these cutting-edge scientific strategies to their advantage.